Welcome back. You know, to accuse somebody of racism, discrimination, it's one of the more biting labels you can attach to somebody nowadays. But 4 years ago, the federal government, they claim that's the way that Westchester County acted when it came to residential housing. And a judge agreed. But today, 4 years later, that accusation still hangs over what they call the golden apple, Westchester County. Now, as the federal government threatens more punishment and the county gears up to go right back to court, I want to bring Andrew in for more on this, because every time you think finally they've gotten past this, it seems that the county executive in Westchester doubled down and said, bring it on again.
And there's one thing we have to make clear at the start of this, Rich. We're not talking about intentional discrimination, but we are talking about discrimination nonetheless. A civil rights group, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and a federal judge all agreed in 2009 that Westchester didn't make sure its housing policies were non-discriminatory. The specifics were about federal funding requirement that this county make sure that there was no discrimination in how it spent those monies. The county agreed it was at fault. It didn't do what it was supposed to do to prevent that. The result, very few low-income minority homes in most of the smaller municipalities across the county. The remedy, spend some money, build some housing units, market them to low-income minorities and minorities, remove the obstacles that make that discrimination happen in the first place. That deal was signed months before Rob Astorino, Republican, was elected county executive. Since then, Astorino has complained about the ruling, calling it social engineering from the Obama administration. He has vetoed and delayed actions that HUD says would remove those obstacles to fair housing. HUD, in response, has now threatened to block $7 million in funding from the county. So the county executive, Astorino, wants to file suit to stop them, and this week the legislature agreed. Earlier today, I spoke about that suit, the settlement, and the vote to okay legal action against HUD with legislator Peter Harcum, a Democrat, and the legislature's majority leader. 4 years ago, when this settlement was announced, there seemed to be a hold your nose and let's get this over with approach to it. Not a lot of people liked it, but nobody wanted the stink of discrimination sitting over Westchester County. 4 years later, it's still not resolved, and the board just voted to let the county executive sue HUD in relation to this case. What's going on here?
Well, let's back up a minute. First, there were a couple of elements. One was to build 750 units. We're on track to do that. The second was to do an analysis of impediments to fair and affordable housing. That was central to the whole thing, and that's also central to receiving CDBG funds. That goes way back to fair housing law.
That's the $7 million that HUD is threatening to withhold?
They're $7 million at this point. So where we are today is the federal courts have ruled that the county executive is in violation of the settlement because he's not done the analysis of impediment, nor has he promoted source of income anti-discrimination legislation. So that's where we are. And because the analysis of impediments is not done, on the other side, HUD is threatening to withhold money.
So why would the Board of Legislators, including a lot of Democrats, vote to back or to allow the county executive to sue HUD over this matter?
It was two things. One, it's a very, very limited action, just seeking an injunction to hold those funds until the disputes are worked out. This should not be, at least in my opinion, a vote of referendum on the county executive's handling of this issue, because I don't think he's done a good job. But we have asked HUD a couple of things. One, as an option, don't penalize the communities. Give those funds to New York State to give to the communities. The other is we've asked HUD just for a delay until the monitor has finished his zoning analysis. But the third was, and on a very, very restrictive basis, was to allow the county attorney to possibly seek an injunction to hold on to those funds.
If it was your choice individually, would you want to seek that injunction? Would you want this suit that the county executive seems to be?
I think it's really regrettable that we are where we are. You know, the courts have ruled quite clearly that the county executive is in violation of the housing settlement order on those two fronts, on source of income and analysis of impediments. The administration has not filed a new or revised analysis of impediments in nearly 2 years. So if I were the county executive, I would be on the phone with HUD every day in a constructive, collaborative fashion, trying to work out these differences.
And yet there's still this image of housing discrimination that sits now with Westchester County. Why hasn't this been resolved or closer to being resolved?
Well, I think because the county executive has a philosophical inflexibility about this. We know how to build housing. I come out of the housing world. Westchester County built 3,000 units in the 10 years prior. Within the settlement, we're on track and on budget to complete the 750 units. But the other side is dealing with the housing culture in Westchester County, and that's where the county executive, in the court's view, has been intransient.
Now the county and the county executive are being threatened with potential contempt charges?
Absolutely. There was a letter on the 19th from the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, very clearly stating that the county executive was in violation, as the Second Circuit Court had held, and very specific steps that he needed to take to avoid contempt charges. They don't have to solve this by the 25th, but they certainly had to have a credible plan and inform DOJ and HUD how they were going to navigate through these two issues.
Finally, this is a politics show, a political show. County executive up for re-election this year. Your party, the Democrats, picking their nominee today, later on tonight. By voting with the county executive for this action against HUD in the courts, do you think there's any chance that you've given up the political advantage on this, that perhaps you're letting the county executive off the hook if there are voters who say, well, he may be responsible for why this hasn't been resolved?
No, because this should not be a political issue. This is an issue where we should all be working together. This is too serious of an issue. The penalties are too great. In fact, we settled this because the penalties were approaching $500 million, which is a huge hit for the taxpayers. So again, it was a very limited action designed to just hold the funds till the dispute could be worked out. But again, it's the county executive, has been held by the courts, is in contempt of the settlement, and needs to rectify source of income and analysis of impediments.
Westchester Legislator Peter Harcum, thanks very much.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Now, more now on the potential contempt charge that we were talking about in the interview. This afternoon, County Executive Astorino resubmitted a bill that would appear to stop that contempt process. It's the same bill that he vetoed a couple of years ago, and Rich, as we've been saying now for 4+ years, stay tuned.
Well, let's translate for everybody. Forget the $7 million they could be on the hook for. They have exposure in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And the one thing everybody knows, you don't try to PO the federal government. And they have stuck a finger in the eye, this particular administration, of HUD and up and down the Justice Department time and time again. They're looking to make Westchester a poster child. And if anybody thinks the total exposure is $7 million, you are kidding yourselves. They're playing with fire on this one. And at the end of the day, the court's already ruled they're going to have to spend the money. This is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, what they're doing. It does not make sense. They can't win. I'm talking about the county executive at the end of the day.
The $7 million was the latest attempt by HUD to try to get County Executive Astorino to take action that they say that has been long overdue. The total exposure of $750+ million is what led to the settlement in the first place. That's why Westchester County was so anxious to sign off on this thing and try to put it in the rearview mirror.
Listen. He's getting some national press on this one. There's no way he can win this fight here, and I think the county's going to pay the price at the end. But again, tomorrow, hopefully, after the vote tonight, we'll be joined by the nominee on the other side here, the Democrats, answering some questions why they went along to go along, like you asked today. All right, we're going to jump to a quick break. When we come back, more RFL. Stay with us.